Hey everyone, hope you guys are having a good morning, afternoon, night, whenever you're listening to this, whatever day you're listening to this. We have a very interesting show today. So, one of my fellow creators who I absolutely adore on TikTok, London's Notebook, reached out to me about a story out of Colorado. And I'll give you a little bit of background on it, and then we're going to bring the child's mom on. But basically, uh, Dax Vestal is a 10-year-old child. He is nonverbal, he has autism, and his para on the bus was being quite abusive to him. And we're going to show you that. And we're going to talk about that. Uh, and the thing is, he wasn't the only one, although today we're going to be focusing on Dax. The person has since been arrested. I'll tell you that at the beginning. But before I bring her on, you know that we have to do just a couple promotions real quick, right? So, as you guys know, I have a podcast. Some of these episodes go on turn into podcast form. This is going to be one of them. You can expect this one with people probably in the next couple of days for those who want to get on the go. Get to YouTube or whatever. And watch. The other two things I want to talk about, and I always do, I've written 2 books. You guys can pick those up. You can get them from Justin on TikTok. Or you can go to TikTok Shop and get them there. The first one is down to a family member. This is what you can play to know it's easy for them to understand your children, but also goes into teaching them the importance of boundaries. The next book, which is one that recently came out, and I am writing a third one, by the way. There. Surprise, sorrow, quick secrets or not. Basically, what this book is about is your kids should not be keeping secrets. Adults, especially, should not be asking your kids to keep secrets. So this book is designed to help have that conversation with them. There's a Q&A at the end that will open up a dialogue with your child and be able to kind of have age-appropriate conversation. So anyway, you can get both of these, like I said, TikTok shop or TikTok.com. And without further ado, please bring on Jess. Hey, Jess, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for coming. We've talked for a little bit, and obviously everything that's going on with Dax and what you're going through as a parent is just absolutely horrific and heartbreaking. So I don't even know where you really want to start this story. We could start by showing the bus video and giving them the idea, or you can kind of introduce it first, whatever you want to do.
Yeah, if you want to show the video, that's fine.
All right, let me get the video pulled up real quick. So I will kind of issue you guys a trigger warning on it. It's disturbing. Let me ask you in this part. I was trying to figure out what she was doing. Is she kicking him here?
So what prompted me to see this video is he came home with a huge bruise all over his left foot, and that's the one closest to her. She actually, you can kind of see at the bottom, she took his shoe off, and she's stomping on his feet while she's doing that.
I didn't realize that was going on.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff that happens like right here, like in his lap area. We've tried to figure out what exactly she's doing because it looks like she's holding on to him. But that like gray thing, if you could see it, it just like flung into her lap. I have no idea what that is. But it looks like she's hurting his hand, or he also came home with like bruises all over his left thigh. So I think she was like either pinching his thigh really hard, or there's times you can see where she's like hitting his thigh too. But it's kind of hard to tell exactly what she's doing in that like lap area because of the other seat.
It's just about she's almost a 30-year-old woman,
Yeah.
and that's the video. And was this the only one? Out of curiosity, was this the only one that you were sent? Because I know that there were several incidents that things happened.
Yeah. So this is the only video, the only portion of any footage that I've ever seen. They initially told me that they only had 3 weeks worth of videos. And then I pushed back on that. And then it was, oh, actually, we have 8 weeks. And then once the police were involved, they have everything from the day that she started until the day that she stopped showing up to work. So that's the only video that I've been allowed to see. I can't see any of it any other videos, which our lawyers are working to try and move that goalpost to so that we can see, because a big problem with this is that's only 2 minutes of a 45-minute bus ride that he took twice a day, Monday through Friday, since September 18th. So we don't know the scope of how we should be treating this abuse as far as therapy goes. So with his severe change in behaviors, we're just trying to figure out, first of all, it's enormously difficult to find somebody who specializes in nonverbal trauma therapy. If this happened to my 8-year-old daughter, we could sit down and talk with somebody and do it, intensive therapy that way, but we can't do that with Dax. So we don't know the scope of the abuse because of his behaviors. I've questioned if there was a sexual aspect to it, only because in the recent weeks leading up to this day, Dax started just randomly exposing himself, and he has never done that before. Like, at least not since he was a toddler and, in that stage.
Yeah.
But as he's been older, he's literally never done that. So we don't know what we're dealing with or what we should be trying to heal. So we're trying to figure out if we're able to see the rest of the footage, or even just be told, like, yes, there was a sexual component, or no, there wasn't, so that we know if we need to address that or not.
The other thing that I want to point out to people listening, because when you and I talked, and I think it's very important to note this, is that you moved to Littleton, Colorado, because of the programs that they have for children like Dax.
Yeah. Yeah, the resources, we moved here from Illinois, more southern Illinois specifically, and his school that he was at previously was great, but we had all of the resources that were available. And as he's getting older and, going through new phases and changing, there's just more things that we could be doing for him, and those just weren't available for us in Illinois. So yeah, that's why we moved to the great state of Colorado.
And I think that's important because you move there because of the reputation that they have. And Littleton, Colorado is a nice area. That whole area, it's nice. It's typically affluent, good school districts. But you picked up your whole family, transferred jobs, everything, to make sure that he could get the care he needed. And this is what happens. And it's completely unacceptable. And then on top of the event or events itself, because honestly, I guess who knows how long it was really going on. It could have slowly progressed, and we'll talk about that in a second. But the school did nothing to really help it when they found out. I've read your story, and by the way, I'm going to scroll this across the bottom for anybody who wants to. If you want to go to unspokensafety.com/who-we-r, you can read a pretty comprehensive summary of Dax's story. And I would encourage you to do it because his story is worth knowing. But one thing that you learn from it, and then of course from our conversations, is that instead of getting rid of her at that moment or suspending anything until, pending an investigation, they kind of just gave you a runaround, and she kept her job for at least a period of time, and nothing really happened. And he was still going back and forth to school, coming home with I mean, what did I read here? Black eyes, missing tooth, done hair, lots of bruises, scratches, etc. And it's just, to me, that's, the abuse is one thing, but to have the school then try to, in any way, shape, or form, not invalidate it is infuriating.
The thing that I don't understand is in January, he came home covered in bruises. He had huge bruises all over both of his thighs and all over his rib cage into his armpit area, around his neck. It was like really bad, and it was very clear that someone did that. The bruises on the back of his arms were like 3 like fingerprints, like someone grabbed him. And that's when the school reached out to Littleton. So his school is like a private entity, and they don't have transportation. So whatever home district the child is in, that district is responsible for transporting them back and forth to whatever the private facility is, because the school district can't support their needs, so they like refer out. So Dax's school contacted the district and was like, hey, Dax is covered in bruises. We do not know why. And then the district liaison, who is kind of like the middleman between the private entity and the district itself, she sent an email. It's actually on our lawyer's website, that said, Dax came home with bruises. We're just trying to figure out what happened, ... if anything. This child looked like he was put through a washing machine. Like he was covered in bruises. So that in itself pissed me off. If anything, obviously something happened. But yeah, they emailed back and said, oh, we watched the ride home. Nothing was out of the ordinary. I don't know why they would specifically only watch the ride home. And at this point, I don't even believe that they did, because this has been proven. I haven't seen any other footage, but the police have confirmed to me that it's months. It's days and days and days of abuse on footage. So I can't imagine that the day he comes home covered in bruises, nothing happened that day. That's pretty weird. Not to mention, if I was in their position and someone was like, hey, this student that you're responsible for their safety is covered in bruises, I would not just say, oh, all checks out here. If I couldn't find anything, I would be working with that family or that school to figure out the cause. Not to say it wasn't us. Good luck. Like, it's wild.
Well, I don't know about Colorado, but I know Tennessee is this way. So I would imagine Colorado is better than Tennessee at this kind of stuff. But, there is a, requirement to report if they see abuse. If you have bruises all over a kid's body, then and you don't know where they come from, then you call CPS. And it sounds like that didn't happen, or maybe it did, but
no. So they're all mandated reporters. Obviously, if you work in a school district, but the tricky thing here is, which I'm sure will be used as kind of a cop-out, is that a lot of times, and for people who don't either have a child that's autistic or not, in close relation to someone who does, and autism is different for every child, but a common behavior is self-injurious behavior, often abbreviated as SIB. So when a child has a meltdown or gets really upset or frustrated, oftentimes they will inflict harm on themselves as a mode of communication. To tell, like, if their foot hurts, they might like smack their foot or something like that. So that is pretty much what it was written off as, like, oh, he must just be doing this to himself. And his behaviors during that time were really severe. And I didn't know, I think that I was kind of taking for granted the fact that we never had those behaviors with Dax. He was always pretty mild tempered, happy to just hang out and eat snacks. Um, but in the last like 6 months, he's become really aggressive and just meltdown every single day. Every day he would come home from school and it would be 2 hours of just inconsolable crying, um, and self-injurious behavior. But the thing is, either I or someone at school was always there to intervene. So it was never a prolonged episode of him, being in a position to hurt himself. The meltdown would start, and either at home I would intervene or at school someone would intervene. So it was never anything that would leave anything more than like a tiny little bruise. Um, so when he's coming home covered in bruises, I'm like, either he was at school and just hurting himself for a really long period of time and no one stopped him, or something else is going on. So, and I've worked super closely with his school, and everybody that works directly with him they're just absolute angels. I know that they love my kid, and I know that even more so now. But at the time, I was like, I don't know who would be doing this because I know them all so closely. But the bus aide was planting seeds to cover her own tracks. And we became friendly only because the way our townhouse is set up is in like a circle. So there's no like direct street access. There's like a footpath out and then there's a street. And I can't see it from where our door is. So I gave her my cell phone number and was like, "Will you just text me when you're like around the corner or if you're running late or whatever?" And we became friendly that way and would just text about like good parks to take the kids or, stuff to do locally. And so eventually in January, she had told me that she was just texting me to let me know that the staff who got Dax on the bus that January day really seemed to upset Dax, and Dax was running away from him and dropping to the ground and pushing him. And that's not typical behavior for him. Dax is known for hugging people. Like he will walk up and hug you no matter who you are. And so him being aggressive with another person was really out of character, and that like sent off red flags for me. So once he got home and I saw all those bruises on him, I didn't even think to ask any questions because she already supplied me with the answer. So I immediately like went in hot at the school, and I kept him home the next day and was like debating on like, do I need to call the police? Like, I don't understand what happened. But so that happened on a Wednesday. He stayed home Thursday, and then Friday I drove him to school and we had like a 3-hour long meeting with everybody. And we put a bunch of rules in writing that, that whoever that staff member was is not allowed to work with Dax anymore. We put in writing who's allowed to be alone with him, who's allowed to take him to the bathroom, like all sorts of things. And then the school did its own like renewal safety trainings, and the director interviewed their entire staff. So, and I didn't even know all of that until recently. So they were doing the right thing without being told that they needed to be doing the right thing, which just speaks to their character. But it was like that, peppered in throughout the months. Something would happen, and I think she knew that she did too much a certain day, so she would need to tell me something, like the February 13th incident where she told me Dax hit himself with a toy on the bus and his eye and his cheek is kind of red. He had a black eye for 2 weeks, and that was the date that the affidavit is made for. There was no incident with the toy. It was because she beat the shit out of him for 45 minutes and realized, oh, this is probably going to leave a mark. I need to give her some, bullshit answer so she doesn't go asking questions.
My heart just breaks for you and for Dax because, yeah, for him to be having the behavior now, obviously that's a result of his abuse. And this is Dax's story, so I can tell you this one offline. But there was another story I read fairly recently where technically she was a woman, but she's by chronologically, but trapped in like a child's body. Severe. I forget what her diagnosis was, but nonverbal, and she was being abused, and she was only able to communicate that via her having seizures, which had her mom camera in the room to find out exactly what was going on, and she found the abuse. And it's very frustrating, I know, as a parent, because you want to know what happened, they want to share it with you, but there's just not really a way to do that. And for
Yeah.
him to go through every day and take him from being this sweet, huggable kid to somebody who's just so angry and frustrated because of which you can't blame him
Yeah.
for that. It's absolutely terrible. So I know you've been, just my curiosity for him, I know you're trying to find somebody who can get him in and work with him. Have you been successful with that, or is there anything that we
I actually, yeah, I mean, I'm taking any and all resources. If anybody out there knows of somebody who specializes specifically with kids who are nonverbal who have experienced trauma, which I'm not sure how that doesn't exist because they're a very vulnerable population that gets taken advantage of. But I did get a contact today. I'm waiting on an email back to see what's what, but it's a former employee from his school that thinks he said he either wants to do it, or if he can find someone better qualified, then he will connect us. But if not, he's happy to help however he can. So right now I'm willing to take anybody's help because I just like an important like distinction with the behaviors is those really, really aggressive, severe behaviors have completely stopped.
Good.
So literally the day after he was off the bus, we've had 2 meltdowns since then. And I think it was kind of just like a PTSD situation. There was one day that it was the first time we went out to eat after this, and they tried to sit us in a booth, and he was not having it. He wouldn't sit down because the booth looked just like a bus seat, like, the like solid back and connected seats. That's exactly what it looked like. So we had a rough time with that. And then there was a time, it was bedtime, and his bed is in my room right next to my bed just for safety purposes. And he just kept trying to hit his own legs and saying all done. And he's completely nonverbal. He has no words, and he has started saying all done. Like that's the time that he's going to speak because like he wants to be done with this. But so I just wanted to kind of point out the fact and kind of explain it in a way that it might be more easily understandable, is that if this were to happen to my daughter, who is 8 and hasn't stopped talking since she was born, she would,
I have one of those too. She's
if I wasn't listening to what she was saying and she was being abused, she would keep saying it to me, so and so's hurting me, this is happening, this is going on, until I heard her and did something about it. So with Dax, he doesn't have those verbal connections. He was communicating that with his behavior. So now that it's over and he's safe, those behaviors have stopped, just like the same way if my daughter was doing that and I had stopped that abuse for her, she would stop having to tell me that it was happening, but that trauma is still there. So it's not,
makes perfect sense.
it's not fixed by any means, just because those behaviors, it's basically he's told me that he's being abused and I heard him. I received that. So now we're working on fixing the emotional damage that's there. So that's, I got some feedback that with saying, since being off the bus, these behaviors have stopped, as could be misconstrued as like, a lot of times kids with autism are, there's a misconception that they don't feel pain the same way, or they don't experience emotions the same way.
I always figured that they were more hypersensitive to it.
Yeah. So I just wanted to make sure that that's clear. Those severe behaviors have stopped, but we haven't even nearly touched the surface of beginning the healing process that's going to come with all of this.
I mean, not always, but it's been my experience that typically neurodivergent kids, kids with autism, and obviously, like you said, there's varying levels of degrees. If you meet one child with autism, you meet one child with autism. It's going to be different the way it impacts the child. But every experience I've had is that they're usually even nonverbal, verbal doesn't matter. They're very sweet. Usually very, very kind, very loving, very, very sensitive kids.
Yeah.
So, if anybody thinks differently, I mean, just think that they might be on a higher plane of feeling than we are. You know?
Yeah, definitely.
I do have a question real quick about Dax, but then I want to come back and ask you about the bus driver specifically because that I have questions there. But so obviously he's nonverbal, and so hopefully this is an okay question to ask, and you don't have to answer. But is he to a point where like he could give you some type of signal? Like if you asked him a question, like and said, "Hey, did this person did she do this? And like, did she grab your arm? Did she hit your?" Could he somehow communicate a yes or a no to you on that?
No, we don't have any yes or no's. Most of his communication is.
Oh, sorry, you broke up a little bit. Can you say that again? Oh, we might be having a technical difficulty, guys. Give us 1 second. When you're coming back, okay, you're back now.
Okay.
I got you. Didn't have a yes or a no, which I didn't mean. I meant like some kind of like, could he like tap you or?
Right. Yeah. So we don't have that kind of communication. He can't tell me one way or the other of anything, but he communicates like, say he wants goldfish and I'm not getting it. He will hold my hand and take me and touch my hand to the goldfish. So that's pretty much the best way that he communicates. But as far as like even minimal, like a nod, we don't have that.
Yeah, I figured that was probably the answer because you would probably have a lot more information.
Yeah.
If he did, but I figured it was worth asking.
Yeah.
So I still want to talk about the bus driver. But before I do, there are at least 2 or 3 other kids that are in the situation that Dax is in. Correct? Was it the same Para?
Yeah, she's been, aside from like maybe a week total over the stretch of months. So she started work there in August and then stopped coming to work March 19th. So in that stretch, she was maybe absent like 7 days total, where they would have a sub, which was often the director of transportation. But it's always been the same paraprofessional. She's the only one back there. And the bus driver was absent more often, but still there pretty consistently.
So there were, like you told me there's at least a couple other families that, experienced abuse. Do we know if there's more that just haven't come forward?
I'm waiting for an update from the detective. They're very limited on what they can tell us, only because should this for any reason go to a trial, it would disrupt our testimony. Basically, we can only testify to what we personally know, not what anyone has told us. So they're not extremely forthcoming, and I understand why, but it's just kind of frustrating not knowing. But I did ask if there were any more victims identified, to which he said no. But then like an hour later, one of the families contacted me, they were at the press conference with us, Jessica and Blake McBride. Their son, Andrew, is in the very last page of the affidavit where it says she reaches over and pulls another student's hair. That was their son. But that's all of the information that we have so far. And then the other family that was at the press conference with us is Brittany and Kevin Yarbrough. Their son, Hunter, hasn't been contacted by the police yet, but all of his injuries that they have documented are like nearly identical to Dax's. So like he had a broken bone on the top of his foot, which it would be really hard to do that yourself. Like it would be easy to break your pinky toe or something like that.
You'd have to drop something on it.
Right. Heavy. And he's always with at least one adult. So someone would be able to account for like, oh, Hunter dropped this on his foot and it broke a bone apparently.
20-pound weight on his foot.
Right. So
yeah.
So it's that right now with the information that we have isn't confirmed by her, but I think anybody could make a reasonable conclusion that was very likely what did that.
It doesn't take much mental gymnastics to get there. So does she, obviously she would have had to go through background checks. So I'm guessing she didn't have a history of this. Or maybe she, you're giving me a look that says maybe she did. So,
hold on 1 second.
Always. So, sometimes, we all do real life guys. And so sometimes, she's talking to one of her other kids, but I mean, this is absolutely, it is appalling. I mean, these are, like she said, the most vulnerable of the kids, the ones that really, truly need to be protected. And this person got away with abuse for 6 months or so.
We might have
Absolutely.
a 3-year-old cameo here in a second. Come here, buddy. You can sit with me. So this isn't like secret information or anything. But so once all of this went enormously public, I have gotten billions of messages that I've tried really hard to keep up with, but I'm not very active online. So
Very hard.
it's hard. But I try to like fish through and see, and like all of the, sending love, whatever. But I try to see if there's any like odd ones off. And there was this woman, I can't remember her name right now. She had messaged like, I think every person I've ever met. Hang on one second. I'm so sorry. Sorry. So this woman had reached out to like everyone, and she said that she used to be really good friends with her, like best friends with her, went to high school with her, and this woman has children of her own, and she left for a weekend for like her birthday or something. And when she came back, her daughter's hand was broken. She had burns all over her body. And her legs were really swollen. And so she supposedly went to the police, and the bus aide fled. She left. This happened in Oklahoma. And she left to Colorado, and they closed the case because they could never find her. So when all of this came out and, her face is all over the news, she tried very hard to contact me. And yeah, so that wouldn't necessarily show up on a background check. But if you can find that out on Facebook, like my aunt literally found this out. She's the one that was like digging. And if my aunt can find this out, like why is someone who's employing people to work with extremely vulnerable children not able to know that?
Well, they
That's
probably just pulled a criminal background check and maybe it didn't show up or
Yeah,
something.
if you do just like the basic background check, it doesn't show up. But there is a police report that was made, and then obviously the child services there was contacted as well. So I don't know how that ball got dropped, but yeah,
Well,
so this is not her first time or her first child, and I'm sure it wouldn't have been her last.
no, I'm sure it won't be if she unless they give real time, I don't think it will be her last.
Yeah, that's another thing. I'm hoping that with all of the footage being reviewed, that there I can't imagine that they won't be able to bring more charges, or at least multiple counts of child abuse charges, because what she's looking at right now could literally possibly cost her probation because she doesn't have a criminal record prior to this. But like neither did Ted Bundy until he was caught, and then they're like, "Oh, you've killed lots of people. This wasn't your first time."
Yeah.
So there needs to be something in the middle there to like, cool, you have a good record on paper. Like you're not a criminal until you get caught. So that
Yeah.
doesn't really mean much. But the class of third degree assault is considered a F6, a class 6 felony, which is in the same category as indecent exposure. So I can't understand how anybody could watch this video or read that affidavit and say, yeah, these are equivalent. Like these belong in the same punishment realm. That makes
So,
absolutely no sense.
you're right. And I honestly think where the law really misses, and I'm going to reference the story I told you about a second ago, but um, when you're dealing with special needs individuals, the law doesn't specify
Mm,
for them. They're treated as if, he's treated as if he is a, you know, I hate to use the word typical, but a
yeah.
typical child, not a neurodivergent, not a special needs child by the eyes of the laws. Whereas really, when you're dealing with special needs, you're working in that you really, my opinion is that there needs to be a change in the laws when it comes to that. And again, I'll give you a little more information on the one story. I've actually not even done a video about it because it's so appalling. But what was happening was, again, she was in her 30s, um, unable to move on her own. Basically completely. I forget the word that they use, but nonverbal. And what was happening is her stepdad was coming in every night, taking her diaper off, abusing her, getting her redressed, and putting her back.
Wow.
And it's happened in Utah. And in Utah, the most the guy could be looking at because of her age is possibly a year, but likely probation.
What?
Yeah.
So here, it's
There's
Utah, so it's probably not the same.
a lot wrong with that story. Even if it was a typical 30-year-old, it should
Sure.
still be a bigger punishment than that. But it adds a different level, I think, to it.
Right.
And the laws, and I think this is the laws for probably any state, are not where they need to be for special needs kids.
No, definitely not. So the only thing that made this, and this really aggravated me at her first court hearing, the state defense argued that the only reason that this is even considered a felony is because he's an at-risk youth, which is what they refer to as children with special needs here. So they do have that little bit of classification there, but she argued against it as if that didn't matter. And then the state's prosecution was like, it's a felony for a reason, and you just listed the reason. Like, that would be the same as saying, well, it's only murder because somebody died. Yeah, that's the point.
Murder. Yeah. Well, it sounds like she's got a great attorney, so that's good for her.
Yeah.
But there are other kids. So with all the additional charges, with all the children that have come forward that are part of this situation, because the other three families, do those stack enough from what you understand to give her some actual? She's out on bond right now too, correct?
Yeah, she lives a mile and a half away from me, and I saw her in front of me at the grocery store. She was in line in front of me, so that was super cool. But yeah, she paid $500. The level of self-restraint. She paid $500 to get out. I think she was arrested on a Thursday, released on a Friday night. But yeah, court is May 3rd at 1:30 Mountain Time. So I think at that point, at least from what I've been told, is they should be done with watching the footage by then. So hopefully there's a book of charges and counts that they can, put into that court date. I just don't know how that works. I don't know. It's my first rodeo, fortunately, but I don't know what that looks like, or I can't imagine if they've seen more abuse, which they have confirmed that they haven't went back and remanded her and added additional charges and rearrested her. So none of it really makes sense to me, but May 3rd cannot get here quick enough because I will be there in person. There will be a virtual link to watch as well. I can send that to you.
Yeah, please do. I'd be happy to stream that for people who want to watch.
Yeah, but I hope it's a mess of counts and charges, and that she's taken that day.
Yeah, I do too. It's because this is obviously habitual. It's not going to stop, and if she gets a slap on the wrist, she'll just go somewhere else and do it again.
Yep.
So going back to the bus driver, you said that the bus driver was out more than she was, so there would have been sub bus drivers as well. How did they not know what was going on when it was this frequent? I think that's
an excellent question.
I figured it might be.
I can't. So this isn't. I've seen actually a few scrolling late night TikTok comments. Would not recommend, but I've seen several comments that were like, the bus driver is busy, you know, it's a bus full of 30 kids and she can't see everything all the time. It's not a bus full of 30 kids. It's a 6-seat bus. It's the small buses. And there was only 6 kids on the bus, or 12-seat bus technically. And there's only 6 kids on the bus. And her rear view mirror is the length of the bus. And if you're sitting in the driver's seat of a regular car, where Dax's seat is on the bus would be your back right passenger. So how do you not know that? What's happening? And I could understand objectively if it was like one time or like one day she did something. This has gone on for months, nearly every single day.
With multiple
And
kids.
yes. And a thing that she was doing was, so Dax, as everybody could see in the video, there was no provocation. Not that that would have warranted what she did, but he is a great car rider. He just sits with his hands in his lap and he looks out the window until it's time to get out. So he does not require any type of safety harness. And when he first started riding the bus, it was a regular, smaller, but just a regular school bus seat with no seat belts. And then they offered me to use one of the like 5-point restraint harnesses. And I was like, no, he doesn't need that. Like if it's for a safety reason, of course, like if he's like getting up and being wild and climbing over seats, obviously I want him to be safe on the bus, but he doesn't do that. And I was like, are you seeing him do that? And they were like, no. And I was like, okay, then we don't need that. And then they had regular like car seatbelts installed just across the chest. And that's what he uses in the car. So I was like, you know, obviously buckle them in. I never knew why school buses didn't have seatbelts to begin with. But so in the videos, in the morning, I would walk him up to his seat and I would buckle him in his regular seatbelt and then I would get off. And then once the bus is moving, she would unbuckle him and put him in a 5-point restraint harness and clip him to the seat so that he could not move or get away from her. So those types of harnesses, for anybody who doesn't know, are like skydiving harnesses. You have to step into them and they kind of like go up and around your shoulders and like through your legs. So he had to have been unbuckled, standing up, and put into this harness. How impaired are the bus drivers that you don't notice that? Something happening right behind you? I don't understand. So I have no faith in the fact that she just didn't know. The last I knew, she was not fired. She still works there. I did tell all of the parents what happened because I know a lot of times with things like this, it's very hush. Nobody wants anybody to know that this happened because of their reputation or liability issues. So I made sure to tell the school, you know, you can give these people my phone number, my email, they can text me, they can call me. I want them to know exactly what happened because this was not day one for her and this was not kid one for her. So if their kid has any like weird unexplained injuries, I need to be able to talk to them without it being sugar-coated or minimalized for liability, privacy reasons. They need to know exactly what happened and I'll show them the video. And that's what I did. The school facilitated a parent meeting for us. So everybody who had a kid on the bus met with me at a local library and I showed them the video. I showed them all of the pictures of all of the injuries throughout the last few months. And the 2 families that I've brought into things are the ones who had extremely similar situations going on. But yeah, the fact that it took me doing that and then the school's response was they sent out an email that said, you know, this was an isolated event that was taken care of immediately. She was terminated immediately. Was literally not true. It wasn't isolated. It still has not been taken care of. They have done nothing.
And I just want to stop you for a second because I want to point out for people who might not have realized what you just said. They were aware of this. They lied to Jess about this. They lied about it, said she was fired. She was not fired. And they continued to allow it knowing what was going on. So I just want to point that out and really stress how terrible that is.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's fucked up, is what it's fucked up.
Yeah.
Because you're supposed to be there to protect the kids. So I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I really just
No, you're fine.
want that to be breezed over. I really want people to hear that. So
No, yeah. The only reason I kind of wish hindsight that I didn't say anything to the bus aide the night before, because I'm wondering if she would have gotten arrested right then if she had gone to work. But I told her the night before, I'm gonna have them, send the footage over to the school so they can see what happened on the bus. And then she didn't come to work the next day. So that's when the police were involved. She wasn't there and not responding to anybody at that point. And then I guess like a day or two later, she tried to come back to work, and she had texted me. I'll read this to you. She texted me the evening I was sitting in the police department parking lot, having just watched, or I just came from the bus watching the footage to the police station to giving like my formal statement and everything. And she had texted me that she walked today. She left them. She had to go off on Boy Mama yesterday, and they're so nonchalant about this lady and her disrespect, but not me. All the other routes didn't fit my kids' schedules. The first routes go out at 5:55 a.m. I can't do that. My kids are out of school at 2:45 every day. Usually I get home at about 4, which isn't too bad for them being here for an hour alone, but 5, that's not going to work.
it's scary that she has kids. I didn't know that.
Actually, some more of my aunt's FBI work on Facebook. I don't have Facebook, so my aunt's like all over this. What she does in her spare time. She actually found out that in September, which is the same time period that Hunter, Brittany and Kevin's son, had his foot fractured. So in September, the bus aide's mom posted on Facebook that her granddaughter fell and broke her foot. This is the bus aide's daughter.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, okay, so Hunter has a bone fracture. Dax's feet are covered in bruises from you stomping on them, clearly. And your daughter also has a broken foot. Strange coincidence.
Mm-hmm.
But
interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, they did not fire her. She tried to come back, and then they claimed that she had too many absences and that they weren't going to allow her to come back.
They didn't want to admit anything, is what that was.
Yeah.
Liability. So this is just a conversation between us, but I'm just curious, like if people were enraged enough to want to call the bus barn or whatever y'all have there to complain about this bus driver, or if I wanted to, actually, we're just you and me talking.
Sure.
But if I wanted to do it, how would one go about doing that? To attack them to a point to wonder why a bus driver that allowed months of abuse to go on with because you're right, those mirrors for people who if you don't remember your school bus as a kid or you never rode it, those mirrors they're like 3 feet long. They're maybe not that long, but they're huge. They're like 2 feet, and they're tall and they're big, and they're supposed to be able to see every bit of that bus.
Right.
So they're big. So unless she's literally never looking up, which I don't buy, then she was very complacent with it.
So I have the phone number to the transportation service if you want it.
Yeah, what is it?
It's area code 303-347-4775.
What's in the bus transportation?
Yeah, it just says Transportation Service Center, but it's the right one.
What's the name of the driver?
Her name's Gina. Oh, squirrel brain. I went off on a tangent. So the bus, when I had the parent meeting and told everybody what happened and showed them a video, they all pulled their kids off of the bus. And then the following day, the bus came around. They actually came to my house, and I was like, be so for real. I know that you're not in my driveway right now. Are you? Get out. But they went around to all of the families, and they were all like, no, we're driving. Sorry. So then the school was like, we've actually canceled this bus route until we can hire better staff and get them properly trained, whatever that means. So there is no bus for that route anymore, but with all of their complaining about staffing shortages, I'm sure that they just moved her to a different route. I don't think they would have at that point fired her.
Well, I mean, I think even if they truly did, I still think that there's questions about the people that they hire, the
Yeah.
ethics, because they've lied to you, so they've lied to the other parents. So I think that there's
Mhm.
still questions. So we're going to leave this phone number up here on the screen and put Gina's name up there because this is all stuff that I'm sure is in the police report and affidavits and something, court documents that will be released eventually through just the fact that they're available, public record.
Right.
But it's challenging because the thing is there has to be accountability with stuff like this. You can't be in the business of trying to help kids, any kids, but particularly special needs kids, and be able to continue operating as normal when you allow this to happen under your watch. You get rid of one person, but there's clearly more than one person that's a problem.
Right.
So it's a terrible story. And
Yeah.
and
And it just keeps getting worse. I don't know if you had a chance to, you probably haven't because it was like late last night, but the board meeting yesterday, um, the superintendent, so this is also information that's circulating now that I've held on to for a couple months because I didn't want to be the one to stir the pot. But now that everyone knows it, somebody else said it. The superintendent for Littleton, Todd Lambert, there is another case in Colorado. It's called Poudre Valley. It's spelled Poudre. Or maybe it's not Valley. That's Poudre District, whatever that is. It's in Fort Collins, Colorado. A man was just sentenced, I think it was like April 12th, sentenced for abusing 11 special needs kids on a school bus. And that took place, I might be mixing my dates up, but they're nailed down somewhere in my notes. I want to say it was February-ish of 23. Our superintendent was the superintendent interim in that district while that abuse was taking place. And then we hired him in Littleton. And
interesting.
now this happened. Yeah.
Interesting.
It just gets worse. But he had sent out an email saying that he wanted to clarify some statements that he made. It was a bunch of like legal nonsense that clearly their lawyers told them to put out. But he said he had apologized for not better communicating with the families in the district, but that he has been in close communications with the families closest involved in this issue. He literally did not send that email to us. We have all of the families actually involved of, parents of those kids have reached out to them and they will not speak to us anymore. So for him to say that he's in communication with the families closest to the issue, I literally laughed out loud. And I sent him the email that was sent to us by another parent that was like, what do you guys think of this? And we were like, we didn't get this. So I emailed him and was like, so just curious, who exactly are the families closest to this issue? Just wondering who it is that you're communicating with, because it's not me, and it's not Brittany and Kevin, and it's not Jessica and Blake, or any of the other 3 families that were on the bus. So who exactly is it that you're communicating with? To which he did not ever respond. And so I brought it up at the board meeting yesterday, and then so did everybody else. They were like, how are you going to just blatantly lie? Do you think that we're not all talking to each other at this point? Like, you can't. And also, please fire your legal team, because whoever advised you to put this out there, yikes. Like, it's wild. They just keep digging and digging and digging and making things worse. So, which, I mean, is great for legal purposes, I guess, but it's just, that's the difference between Dax's school and this district. When I brought problems to his school, they were doing the right thing behind closed doors because they genuinely give a shit about our kids. They wanted to make sure that everybody knows how to, properly intervene when a kid is having a meltdown, or, properly help corral a kid who's trying to, be one with the woods and run away. They did all of those things without telling me about them because they are just genuinely good people. The district is being told, you're doing a really shitty job right now and everyone is looking at you. What are you going to do to fix it? And they just keep making things worse.
The thing is too, and I told you this yesterday, and I was like, I don't know if I'm going to say this or not, but I'm going to go do it anyway. Because it's a bit of a reach to a degree, but like we talked about this yesterday. It was the 25th anniversary of Columbine, which happened in Littleton, Colorado, and when you kind of really look into it, there were warning signs that the school could have had about those kids, and they failed that. And you see what happened. And look, I know it was 25 years ago; it's a long time, but for most of us who have kids that are in school now, high school, middle school, particularly, we remember Columbine. It was big. It's ingrained in our brains. It's going to be there forever. And as you said yesterday, anybody with eyes and ears knows what Columbine is. And so you would think that, given the fact that even 25 years later, when you hear their name, it's synonymous with a horrific event, that they would go out of their way above and beyond to try to make sure kids are safe. And I realize that this is very different than a school shooting, but at the same time, it's the most vulnerable of the kids in their district, and they're allowing this to happen and then lying about it and covering it up versus being like, hey, we fucked up. We need to do something right about this. But instead, they double down, they triple down, quadruple down. They lie to you. They lie to the other parents about it. They lie to the media about it, hoping it'll go away. And all you're going to do is blow it up more.
Yeah.
And I just don't understand that when you already have, in my opinion, a school district that's synonymous with one of the most infamous or notorious events, and what I would call maybe educational history when it comes to mass events.
Yeah.
You would think that they would really try to make a difference in making sure they do everything they could to keep every child as safe as possible and not have adults bullying the kids.
Yeah. You would think.
You would think that.
Pretty much every scenario in this entire situation has just shown me that common sense is not at play here, because everything that makes sense in my brain is not what has happened. Like with the bus aide, it would make more sense to me if she didn't like me, or if I complained about her or was rude to her. She was so super friendly to me. I was so nice to her. She constantly told me that, oh, you're my favorite parent on the route. Dax is such a sweetheart. And then she's doing this to him. That doesn't make sense. It would, if she didn't like me, it would obviously still be shitty, but it would at least be a complete story. And then with the school, you would think that they would really hold safety as their number one priority, given the history here.
Yeah.
That would make sense, but that's just not the case. So.
And especially with her too, it wasn't just Dax that was targeted. So it wasn't like an issue with Dax. It wasn't an issue with you. And it was an issue with, for whatever reason, she gets off hurting special needs kids. I mean, let's just call it what it is.
Yeah. It's,
she's a child abuser. And that's what she was charged for, right? We have the affidavit. By the way, affidavit's on my Instagram for anyone. And the charges that you shared with me is like the crimes against at-risk adult / juvenile third-degree assault and crimes against at-risk adult juvenile injury. And that's just for you. And I know that, again, could be more charges that come. I'm sure the other parents have charges that are going to be similar, I would imagine.
I would hope so.
So the May 3rd court case, what is that to determine? Is that like
I'm not totally sure. So I think it's to go over charges, and maybe, I don't know if I'm jumping the gun here. Like I said, this is my first rodeo, so I'm not, all of my court experience was like watching the Johnny Depp trial. So I don't know exactly.
Mine all comes from my cousin Vinny, by the way. So
so I don't know what it looks like in the beginning. So we had a bond hearing. I think this one is called like a preliminary hearing where she's read her charges and then I think at that point she would offer in her plea, whether she's guilty, not guilty, or no contest. I think. I'm not totally sure. But I think based on that court date will determine whether or not it's going to go to a trial, which is going to take forever, or if it's just going to go to sentencing, I guess. But I don't
Do you
know.
think she's going to take a plea?
I think I was told that I have to agree to that. I don't know. I was told that by someone in Wisconsin, so I don't know if that's the same here. But in abuse cases or victim cases, or not victim cases, minors being hurt in any way, I think you have to agree to whether or not they get a plea deal. So I don't know about that yet, but nobody has said that to me that's in a position of authority. So I don't know if that's true here or not, but I think it would be really stupid of her to plead not guilty with video evidence. And I can't imagine that her award-winning state defense attorney is going to be working really hard to put a solid defense together in that instance. So I can't imagine that she would do that. But like I said, common sense is not at work here. So who knows?
Well, I mean, at most, it needs to be on her record. She needs to be in a
Yeah.
position where she never gets to work with children ever again. Frankly, I mean, honestly, CPS probably needs to be called on her for her own kids.
The school actually did. They did do that.
Good.
They made a report. So
obviously we don't know how that turned out, but it's
yeah, that's a shitty thing. I'm like, can you guys update me? They're like, no.
they're not going to update you on that.
Yeah.
So is there anything that we haven't talked about that you still want to share? I mean, I don't know what I don't know, so I'll leave that to you.
I don't think so. Actually, there is one sentiment that I objectively understand the meaning behind saying this, but it kind of, I guess I would just like to ask everyone to be a little bit objective when making comments on this situation. If you haven't read the affidavit, if you haven't watched the video, if you haven't read the story, gather all of your information before you come to a conclusion. And saying things like, she's lucky that's not my child, or if that was my kid, I would smile in my mugshot. Like,
well, I said that to you, so then I'm sorry.
no, it's like I said, I understand the sentiment, and I was that person a month ago. I have said those same words out of my mouth, but that's not real life, unfortunately. We all have wants and wishes. I will say that much. But I have children. I can't go to jail. I can't, throw my life away because that's what she chose to do with hers. Do I wish, great things for her? No, I do not. But I can't be the person to make those deliveries. I have to be here for Dax.
We wish a life filled with inconveniences.
Yes. I hope you step on every single Lego to ever cross your path. But I can't put them there.
You every day.
Right. Yes.
Because you forgot all of those things.
Yeah. May you have all of the karma that you so wonderfully inherit.
Your air conditioner goes out every year.
Your pillow is never cold. But yeah, I have to be home for my kids, and I can't be irresponsible. Obviously, when someone hurts someone you love, especially your child, that inner feral beast she's there. She's well and alive. But I have to be level-headed and do the responsible thing for my kids because they need their mom here. So just take that with a grain of salt. Anyone who's listening to this, that I understand the sentiment and I'm with you, but it stings a little bit because it kind of sends the message like I'm not doing enough because I haven't kicked her door in.
Well, first of all, I think you've done enough, and let's go back to something you just said here. For anybody who wants to read the whole story, you got to see the video here. If you're listening to it on a podcast later, I will, you can see part of it on TikTok. I posted it'll be posted up on Instagram. The affidavit, the entire affidavit, is on Instagram. You can also go to this website here. You can go to unspokensafety.com, and then I struggled to find it, but then Jess was nice enough to give me the exact link to straight to the story. So it's unspokensafety.com/who-we-are, and you can read Dax's story and know what's going on, and that will really kind of get you up to date if you want all of the information. But obviously, other than obviously awareness is important. So here's what I'm going to say from a perspective before I ask Jess, which I might be taking the words right out of her mouth, but before I ask Jess what else we could do to help, here's what the importance of awareness in these stories are. This last week alone, we've talked about a girl in Indiana, a 7-year-old girl who a teacher brought in an unauthorized visitor, and this guy lined up the girls and kissed them, second graders. We talked about another student who got the crap beaten out of her on the bus with a metal tumbler. There was another story in Pennsylvania where in a cafeteria, a student came and attacked another kid with a Stanley Cup. This is all in the last week, guys. And now we have Dax's story that we're talking about. And the point of this is they're all different locations because we're talking about Pennsylvania, Kentucky, Indiana, and now Colorado, all different states. So this stuff happens everywhere. And this is just kind of a reminder that if you have kids, you have grandkids, nieces, nephews, or just any friends with kids, that these stories need to be made aware of, because what if it's happening where you are? What if you have special needs kids or little kids in your class that aren't getting, or not getting, but are not getting the protection they need from the schools or the system and the adults that you trust every day to watch and make sure your kids get to and from school safely. So that awareness is important. That's why we talk about these. That's why we share these stories, all that kind of stuff. But other than that, that's my sentiments. What else can people do to help you and Dax and these other families with Littleton?
So with that said, this is clearly not a Colorado issue. This is a federal issue, and that's where we plan to take it. There needs to be regulations. There needs to be safeguards in place. The lack of experience needed for these people to work with kids in general are vulnerable, but especially kids who can't speak is wild. She has the same qualifications to work at a gas station. Like, that's very bare minimum. So that obviously needs to change. So with the website, if you go to it, you can subscribe, and we don't have anything packaged and ready to deliver yet, but we're working on putting legislation together to make those changes at the federal level. So if you subscribe on the website, I am not online very much, so I'm not going to blow your email box up. But whenever something does come up where, maybe there's like a Capitol Hill event, or we're going to do a fair in the summer that's an aware fair that's just, for the community, get their families together and have an event for people to just, exist in public and have a good time with a community that gets it or is an ally of it. So all of those types of things you can find over at the website. So right now, subscribing is really the most that people can do as far as being in the loop and knowing what's next and what they can take part in. And then just sharing, just talking about it. I know it's a really hard video to watch, but that was his reality for 6 months, every single day. So I think, like I said before, the least we can do is look at it and share it and do something to fix it.
I would agree. And like I said, that I texted you that information for Krista yesterday.
Yeah.
So whenever you have time, reach out to her. That's her cell, so you can text her as well.
Okay,
that was something we had on the other night, who is, bringing back up Columbine, that, Rachel's challenge was born out of Columbine, and their biggest thing is to help stop bullying. And that's going to be with teachers as well. Staff, I don't say just teachers, staff, as well as the students. So I feel like there's good collaboration there as you get rolling with this.
Yeah, definitely. I'm looking, anybody who wants to join the march, I'm happily taking all allies, because I feel like the more this isn't something that's, the outskirts. This I'm certain is happening in other places that just hasn't been discovered yet. And it took me 3 months of being neurotic to figure this out with no verbal cues from my son and being enormously manipulated and lied to by the bus aide and the transportation company itself. So I'm sure that other people are living in the unknown, especially if their kid has more severe behaviors than Dax has, because it's so easily passed off as, oh, they just had a rough day today.
Yeah.
So it's
And they
not
can't tell you. So
exactly. So it's not, that was an isolated event. No, this is happening everywhere. I'm certain of it because
Florida,
bad people exist and vulnerable people
It was
exist.
3 months ago, so I did a video of a
Mhm.
special needs teacher chaining special needs children up.
Yes,
Like
I
to
saw
death.
that. Like it's
Florida too. That's a 5th state.
wild. It's very wild. So anybody who wants to be a lawful vigilante in a sense of we see you and we're going to find you and we're going to catch you. Like the more eyes that we can have pointed at schools and their districts and what are you doing to protect my kids? How often are you watching those videos? Do you even have videos? This is a fun horrific fact. It's up to the district whether or not they do background checks on their employees. It's up to them whether they have cameras or not, how long they keep the footage for, and if it's ever reviewed. It's up to them. That needs to be federally mandated by the
Standard.
Department of Education. There needs to be a third party who has no dog in that fight. Their reputation isn't on the line if they do see something bad happening. There needs to be someone with eyes on that. And I know that it's big. I mean, it's education. There's a billion schools, but someone needs to be doing it. This safety is not a luxury. It is a bare minimum requirement.
It's the minimum that we need to be doing for children.
Yeah.
Minimum.
So wherever you need to cut your, vacation budget for our school leaders, everybody can pitch in a little bit of their pocket change to make sure that children are being abused and then expected to go to school and be productive.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Squirrel brain.
Yeah, you're good. I appreciate you sharing Dax's story. I know that it's not easy to have to relive this. I know that you understand the importance of sharing it, and I know that you're very good at compartmentalizing it to be able to talk about it. But I know it's not easy every time. I'm a parent too, and I'm angry for you with everything that I've seen and talked to you about. And I saw you sent me the video last night. I didn't watch it till probably 45 minutes before we got on, and I went and showed him. I was like, "You need to watch this. Like, look at this video." And it's enraging, especially when it's an adult and a child, but especially more so when it's a special needs child that can't defend himself, that can't even speak up for himself.
Yeah,
it's even worse. So, like I said, please make sure that this story is shared everywhere. Make sure to comment on it when you see it, and like Jess said, be respectful in the comments. I always like to remind people, you never know and with my videos, especially, oftentimes the family members are watching. So don't ever say something that you wouldn't want them to see.
Yeah.
So, well, I appreciate you coming on today, and
thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And we're not done with it. I will be following up with you, I'm sure, before then, but I definitely I'm gonna be chomping at the bit to hear what happens on May 3rd.
Yeah. To be with you. I'm sorry. Bye. Machi wants to be with you.
All right. Well, on that note, I'll let you go be with them, and and you guys have a great rest of the day, and we'll be in touch soon.
Love you.
All right. Thanks, Justin. See ya.